So folks, if you've come this far, I think you've really made a lot of progress. I want to share one or two other ideas with you which will really make you a strong, grounded leader for any great team. This one's what I call walk the talk. As usual, the worst leaders are the ones who don't, first of all, stand for anything. And the second worst ones, perhaps, in that pecking order, are the ones who have something, but they don't even stand for what they say. So walk the talk is about you demonstrating and doing what you're asking your team to do. If you remember one of the very first exercises that we did, I asked you to define greatness and I asked you to come out with the 5 elements, and you rated yourself. And I said anywhere where on a scale of 1 to 10, you're not a 9 or 10, to build your own competence and develop qualities so that you become a 9 or 10. So first, you've got to be the person, and then you will be able to build a team that's coming along with you, that you can inspire, that you can demonstrate that charisma to. The second part of the story of walking the talk is to just keep some of these things in mind. The first thing is you have to be very clear, what is it that you stand for? What are some things that matter to you? And ask yourself this question. So do the short exercise. Write down the answer to this. The question is, what is important to me in my leadership? And you'll find a lot of words. So I urge you to write down at least 20 things which are important to you in your leadership. For example, performance is important to me. It's important for me that I take care of my team. I should be looked up to. I should deliver value. So like this, whatever you feel are important, write down 20 things. You can pause this video and come back when you're ready. All right, so if you've done this right, you have the question, what is important to me in my leadership? And you have 20 things which are important to you. I want you to pick out the top of those things, the top 5. And just like you did earlier with the qualities of your team members, you just do the same shortlisting exercise and pick out the top 5 things which are important to you in your own leadership, and make a note of those things. So I'm just going to use some random examples here. If I say one thing that's important to me is honesty, another thing that's important to me in my leadership is setting the right example. The third thing that's important to me is communicating clearly, and I might have 2 more things. So if you have these things down, you're going to use this. What are these areas? What do I mean by saying walking the talk? And I sort of alluded to this earlier, saying that you have to be a good representative of the greatness that you're trying to create in a team. So you have to first know what you stand for. And if I say communicating clearly is one of the things that I stand for, what this does is it acts as an internal compass as I go through work. So for example, if I get a phone call, and I'm really busy sending an email, so that other person on the other side, maybe a team member, is just talking to me, I'm going to keep this in mind. I'm going to say, wait a minute, am I communicating clearly right now? And if the answer is no, I'm going to do something about it, because I've driven into my own head that this is something that I stand for. So I'm going to tell this person, look, I want to give you my undivided attention. So I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes. I'm going to finish that email and call this person back. And that decision becomes extremely easy because I know that one thing that I stand for is communicating clearly. Let's take a slightly larger example. You've launched a new project or a product, and you have a brochure for it. Now you sent this to somebody, an external agency, to design this brochure, and it's come back to you. You're looking at it. It looks really jazzy. It looks colorful. It looks very impressive. But when you read through it, you're not sure if you sort of understand it. You're not sure if everybody would understand it. So if that's the case, I know that I'm not going to send this brochure out, because one of the things that I stand for is communicating clearly. So I'm going to show this brochure to an absolute newbie who has no idea about this and ask that person to explain what's in the brochure to me. If the person can't do it, then that's a bad example of communicating clearly. And I would want to redo that brochure. So you see in each of these examples, What you're doing is using what you stand for as a driving force to take decisions, to move your team and yourself in the direction of the goals of what the team is trying to achieve. So what you've written down are of course true for you. There are no right or wrong answers. It's important to keep that in front of you and work with that. So every time you're taking a decision, if you're doing something in office, it's important that you stick with those things because that's your internal compass. The other thing which I'd like to also bring in here, those top 5 qualities of greatness which you wrote down in the first module, and I asked you to write down what greatness means to you and the 5 elements. I think you've got to bring those elements here because that's another part of you walking the talk. And keep checking if you've lived up to these elements, because if you haven't, then somewhere you've stopped being the kind of leader that you're asking your team to become. This is another dimension of walking the talk. Well, there's one more thing which I have to say about this. Maybe you should try this out. Never, ever say anything to your team which you're not willing to practice yourself. So if you change, for example, the office timings, or if you change the meeting timing, or if you decide to work on all Saturdays instead of just having a 5-day week, you should be willing to be in office on those Saturdays. You should be willing to ask yourself, am I willing to do this before I go tell my team to do it? If you're not, then you better move on to something else. If you're willing to do it, then I think it's a good idea to make that announcement or push that idea into the team. Suppose you say every email that goes out has to be copied and pasted into a Word file. Then you better be willing to do it yourself. So this is another element of walking the talk. And this is also something that I've noticed. Consistency. Leaders lose credibility when they say one thing. Of course, they also stick to it. Then after some time, they say something else. Then they stick to that. Then they say something else. So next time you come out with a new rule or a policy or a procedure, nobody in the team is taking you seriously. They're saying that this is just the flavor of the month. Next week, it's going to be something else. Next month, it's going to be something else. It's important that you have the staying power to try out a process that you set long enough for you to test whether it's really worked or not. And if you're going to change it, I think there has to be a very formal and clear communication to everybody in the team saying why you're stopping this and why it's going to be changed. Because if not, you'd be seen as somebody who doesn't walk the talk.